Go ahead with the
Yeah, as soon as I start talking, if you wouldn't mind letting people in, that'd be great.
Okay.
Go ahead, Cynthia.
Yeah, change is hard and people are reluctant to change and reluctant to go from their old gas stove to a newfangled induction stove top. So we thought it would be good to have a couple of early adopters talk to you about what they are doing to electrify their homes and their lives. And one of them is our own Tom Coleman, who is the chapter chair. And he will talk to you about how the family converted to electric energy in 2020 and how that's working out. Then we're going to have Derek Eder from Oak Park return to, he was here in January. He was talking about how he's electrifying his 100-year-old Oak Park home. And I think at the time he talked to us, he was thinking about putting in a heat pump, but realized that the house was leaking energy like crazy and that he was going to have to tighten it up or else he'd need probably several heat pumps. And he was wasting money and wasting energy. So he will give us an update, and then to wrap it up, Tom will come back and talk about the family EVs and their experience with electric vehicles. And again, how that's working out, particularly financially. And then at the end, we will have Q&A. So either put your questions in the chat or hold them, and you can use the raise hand function and ask your questions. So Tom, do you want to get started?
Sure. Can you all see my screen?
Yep. Okay,
great. Okay, so this we'll start with the solar part of my thing, but I'll just give a quick overview. So really it's about emissions and it's about money. And so you can see the little graphic that Cynthia had put in the meeting invite, things like solar panels, LED bulbs, smart thermostats, e-bikes, electric cars, batteries, heating and cooling, cooktops, and different things like that. And so sometimes we don't think about all the things that are possible. And, we're pretty critical of, government and passing laws. And of course, all that's important. But, when we set an example, not only can we feel good about what we've done, but then the people we work with, the people we, neighbors and so forth, see the things we're doing, and then they do them too. So really, that's what's critical. I just want to put in a plug for Rewiring America when it comes to your car and your homes, especially your homes. I mean, this is an example. I plugged in a few pieces of information. They said, hey, there's $14,000 worth of upfront discounts available to you, $15,600 worth of tax credits, and I should be able to save, $1,250 a year, total incentives of $29,600. And, let me mention Chris Murphy as well. She's an expert on all of these things. I'm not sure she could be here tonight because I think she's doing a presentation. But when it comes to tax credits for heat pumps and things, in addition to things that, Derek and I will be talking about tonight, Chris Murphy can answer a lot of these questions. He's really good. So let's start with emissions. You can see the breakdown as of 2021 from the EPA with residential and commercial and home buildings at 13%. Actually, it's higher if you take the electricity generation and apply it to the buildings. I think it takes it up to around 35%. So your home is critical. Your car is critical at around 29%. And electric generation is huge. And industry and agriculture, of course, is huge. And the real important thing about agriculture, of course, is the fact that we need, it has the capability along with agroforestry and things like that, to be a sink instead of a net emitter. We want this to be able to capture some of the emissions in the other areas. So with that said, this is a breakdown of your home. And you can see 29% for heating, energy use, 17% for cooling. So you can see it's huge. Water heating, 14%, appliances, 13%, lighting, 12, and other would be 11, and 4% for the electronics. So the home is huge. And so you think about planning ahead. What is it that you want to do next? So I'm going to talk 13 years worth of things we started doing in 2010. But hopefully you can plan it out better than I did, because and many times we did things based on must have. But if your car is, say, 12 years old, maybe it's on its way out, you want to be planning for what you might do in terms of moving to an electric. Same thing with your stove and different things like that. So some of it's about what's urgent, the age of the appliance, whether it's gas or electric now. Should you do efficiency first, like insulation, windows and doors? And then when it comes to energy, do you want to do solar before your electric vehicle, for example? We didn't do it that way, but it kind of makes sense to, get off the grid, or get mostly off the grid with solar first, and then move your electric car onto that. And who can help? Well, obviously I can help, and Derek and members of Climate Reality can help. Certainly, Christina Murphy is expert, but also Rewiring America. I get the link at the bottom. We'll get these slides out to you, and Climate Reality. So our 13-year transition kind of looked like this. In 2010, we replaced 20 windows in the house with Windows World. I got mixed feelings about that company, but we did it, and it was important. Light bulbs up to LED. We did a plug-in hybrid in 2011, a Chevy Volt. The good news about that is it cuts emissions almost in half versus a gasoline car. So that was a really good move in 2011. And 2017, I went to a zero emission vehicle. Basically we call them EVs, but it's a little difference between plug-in hybrid and zero emission. That was a Chevy Bolt EV. It was a very cost-effective vehicle, less than $40,000 at the time, and now they're like less than $30,000 or around 30,000. We did shower heads in 2018, insulation. We had a home energy audit. The north side of our house was just leaking heat, obviously air conditioning, just terrible, through the roof. We put cellulose insulation in the walls, and in some of the walls, and certainly in the attic. That was critical. It was so bad in our house. Our house is 1989, but they put cheap things in houses many times, and really to keep the costs down, and you pay for it over the long term. So for example, we have a bath up in the upstairs, one of our baths, and routinely the water would freeze, in the drain. And that's how bad things were. And my wife Jean's went to a zero emission vehicle in 2019. It was a used Volkswagen e-Golf. Didn't have much range, but it was good for her around town, and she really loved it. We moved to 2019 low flow toilets from American Standard. In 2020 is when we did the solar panels, and I'll talk a bit about that because it's so critically important. We picked SunPower. There's a lot of good companies we looked at. That's one of them. It's a good company. And in 2021, we did the electric lawnmower. A lot of people don't realize that little gasoline-powered lawnmower actually emits more pollution than your car. Okay, fortunately, it's not running all the time like a car may, but it's bad. I couldn't take it. We went with an Ego. We're very happy with that machine. Then 2021, Jean went off the e-Golf to a Chevy Bolt EUV. Nice, excellent car, 247-mile range, and very cost-effective. In 2022, we had skylights in 2 of our bathrooms where the heat was going right out. Now, we didn't know this at the time because the energy audit that we did in the walls didn't include the skylights. And so when we looked at the skylights, there was actually water condensation, because these skylights were not like thermopane type glass. And so the heat was just going right out from the top of the roof. And you all know that heat rises. So these two bathrooms were upstairs and the heat was rising right out of our house. So we put the Velux skylights in place. And by the way, because we had done the solar panels 2 years earlier, we had to remove, I think it was 5 of our panels off to do the skylights and then put them back on. So it's not like the solar panels go in and, you know, you can't take them off. You absolutely can take them off if you have to. Of course, I had to pay a little bit to do that. But anyway, the next zero emission vehicle was in 2022. My vehicle, we went from an EV we had before to Hyundai Ioniq 5. And that really complements my wife's Chevy Bolt, because the Chevy Bolt had great range, but it charged, you know, in public charges when you're on a trip quite slowly. And so when we got the Ioniq 5, we wanted to make sure we had a really fast, something that could charge in like 18 minutes versus the Chevy, which is like 45 minutes. So the Chevy, I don't want to knock it. It's great value, but on the other hand, there's pros and cons there. And then the electric snowblower in 2022 from Ego. And then the 2023, we did the Felco doors. We have 3 doors, 2 in the back of the house and 1 in the front. And these doors, we knew for quite some time, were like leaking like a sieve in terms of energy going right out the doors. And we really should have done them sooner, but it is what it is. We did it in 2023. And then the last thing we did was in 2023. In fact, our Frigidaire electric induction stove was delivered last week and powered up by the electrician yesterday, I think it was. And that has a convection oven. So we've done most things, but we haven't done the electric clothes dryer yet. We have a gas clothes dryer, and we have, unfortunately, a fairly new gas, you know, heating system and electric air conditioning. Fortunately, the heating system, which is like 3 years old, and the air conditioning are high efficiencies. So that's my trying to make myself feel better that it's one is gas and one is a regular air conditioner. On the other hand, I want to warn you that when you go to your traditional heating and air conditioning company, they will do everything they can to talk you out of doing the right thing. And that's what I found. So I'm very upset at the company that we were using, because they talked us out of the heat pump. And I really regret that, because that didn't have to happen. So we'll get to those things. The dryer will be next. Have to do an upgrade in my electric panel to do that, the next step. So that's kind of the overview. And the ones that I've highlighted with green arrows are things that use electricity. So important for me is the one in red there, because that's the source of electricity. And that's what I want to chat a little bit about here today, because everything comes off that. Now, I live in the city of Naperville. And for those of you that don't know this, Naperville is one of, I think, 32 cities that's part of the IMEA, which gets about 70% of its power from the Prairie State Energy Campus. That's coal. And, you know, it's like number 7 high emitter in the country, and like number 1 in Illinois. So in 2020, when I found out about that, I was very upset. So I wanted to save money, and I wanted to get off Naperville coal, and I was going to wait around for Naperville to sign new contracts, which we're still waiting for. I wanted to get rid of as much of them as possible.
Hello?
So that's what we focused on.
Hello.
Is somebody saying something? Why don't you all make sure you're on mute, and then we'll move ahead. All right, so let's go ahead. So the thing I like about wind and solar, you know, it's not that it's just renewables, it's very compatible with nature. So we look at a leaf, you know, and then we look at a solar panel on the right, there's a lot of common there and a lot of synergy there versus drilling for fossil fuels and burning them and everything else. So I will just say that. And the cost of solar panels have dropped dramatically, as you can see in this picture here. So if you looked at them 5 years ago or 10 years ago, check it out again, because they're really coming down, and there's a lot of incentives as well. And as you can see, the top 10 states, about half of them are quote red states and the other half blue states. So this is not so much of a partisan thing, although in the state of Texas, the legislature tried to cripple renewable energy. That failed because really it's about money. And that's one thing that everybody worries about or is concerned about, money. So I think as a climate organization, yeah, we got to talk about climate, but I think we need to talk about money. And Illinois is like number 15 on the list. So we've got a ways to go to catch up to these other states that are moving right along. Two approaches: rooftop solar and community solar. With rooftop, you can get 100% of your energy, certainly 70 to 95%, depending on your home and how much shade and tree cover and those kinds of things, because trees will prevent or reduce the sun's power. Also, the way the home faces, that's important. So fortunately, our home is faced east and west, the way it's faced. So the way when the sun comes up and goes down on the other side, we have panels on both sides. And many of the things I talked to you about a minute ago helped with home efficiency so that we're not wasting energy as we do these things. Oh, I'm sorry. And community solar at the bottom, if you can't do solar because of the way your home is or the way trees are, certainly don't want to cut trees down. You can go many places. You can go community solar and get about a 20% discount and share a solar farm. Now, some places, I don't think you can do that. I don't think you can do that in Naperville because it's part of a muni, which is separate from like a ComEd or an Ameren. So I will say that. So check that out. Certainly, it's better to go rooftop solar because, you know, a lot of people are concerned about the grid. Is the grid going to be able to take all the stress of, you know, going with electric cars and all of these kinds of things? Well, when you decentralize by putting the power plant for your home on your roof, you're decentralizing. And if you do what's being done in Australia, they've gone from about 25% to about 30% of all homes have solar. So what's happening is they're decentralizing power and not putting as much stress on the grid as they go to electric cars. So with that said, the average solar system is going to offset about 260,000 pounds of CO2 over 25 years. And that's a lot. You know, it's carbon sequestration is just a, you know, massive 139 acres of forest, emissions from burning 129,000 pounds of coal. And you can see the statistics up here. It's worth looking at. But a rooftop system is about $25,000, of which you might have to pay about $9,000. And the average payback is about $1,500 a year. So it's about a 6 or 7 year payback. But the payback is gigantic as soon as you make the investment and do it. It's certainly similar to the investment of, say, remodeling a kitchen or something like that. The good news about it is there's an ROI to that. And speaking of ROIs, one of the concerns we had when we did solar is we wanted to know how it would affect our home's reselling, sales price if we were to sell the home. And the good news is you can see the top 10 cities, there's a significant, if you go green, like solar and panels and solar appliances and so forth, you will tend to have an increase in your home's value that's really pretty dramatic versus people that don't do that. So even the bottom, cities that you see here, Seattle, Washington, well, they don't get much sun, to be honest with you. So it's just a minor amount if you were to do many of these things. But in other areas, it's, pretty significant amount of increase. So we figured for our home was at least $40,000. So we felt very good about that. In Illinois, the average selling price for green homes is $480,000. And I apologize, I don't know what the average price of a home is, but typically everywhere, it really does help a lot. So how does this thing work? Well, you put the panel on the roof. And by the way, the real expert in the chapter for this is Lisa Albrecht. And so, hopefully, Lisa, you're there and you can put your name and email address in the chat so people can contact you because you run a solar company and you can help people a lot better than I can and advise them on specific things. So I want to make a plug for Lisa there. And then, so what happens is the sun, beats down on the panels and the solar panels convert that sun into DC electric power, which goes to an inverter, which converts it to AC power, which is the type of power that's used in your home. And what happens is whatever power is generated, your home can use that before it uses the grid. And if you generate more sun than more power than you're using in your home, you sell it back to the grid. So it goes out to the grid, and your meter, your electric meter, runs backwards. And say at night when there's no sun, you're buying power seamlessly from the grid, just like you always have. And it's totally seamless. You don't have to worry about it. It just happens. And so what happens is, so for example, I think this is from Christina Murphy, a system on the left where they only get 55% of their energy from solar. And let's just say their upfront cost for that smaller system is $19,000. They get a $5,700 federal tax credit. And from Illinois, this thing called SREX, which they basically fronting you money of savings that you would have to help them get to their energy the state's objectives, about $6,900. And because there's programs you can get in to get group buys, and I didn't do that, but they exist now. Your final cost is, in this particular case, in the left, $5,900. So it could be you have trees, so you can't get 100% of your power. So you get trees because of trees or shade or whatever it is. But on the right, this individual here has got a bigger system, and they're getting virtually all their power except for maybe in the evening, and then they produce during the day. And you can see their system's more expensive. And their federal tax credit is more, their Illinois SREX more, and the group discount. So their final cost is $7,000, which is not a lot more than the house on the left. But I'm thinking the house on the left couldn't do more because of whatever the way the house is, or trees or whatever. So obviously you want to do as big a system as you can. And for us, it looked this way. So, I was able to get a 26% federal tax credit in 2020 when I did this. I think it's 30% now. The city of Naperville gave me 5% along with SunPower, which is the company we used. And then 30% from Illinois Shine, which is the SREX, that's the Illinois money, which was equivalent to 15 years of use. They fronted me right up front. And then the home value increase was probably about $40,000, I calculated at the time. And the system I picked had 100% warranty on all of its parts for 25 years. So I never again had to worry about whether something breaks in that system. And so at the bottom of the screen, it shows you how Illinois calculates it. It's 15 years of energy generated times a certain price, which Lisa can tell you what that is. I don't remember now, but then they give you a payment, okay? And so that's how those discounts that I had on the previous page, how that's covered. Now, the process I went through looked kind of like the top there. There's a home visit, you pick a company. It could be Lisa, it could be some other company, and they do a site visit installation. They then do some systems engineering on the roof and the load analysis, and they prepare your municipal permits because you need a permit. You have to wait for the permit, which I think took 4 or 5 weeks. And then the solar system was installed, and then final inspection occurred. I didn't have to worry about the second row, which is HOAs, because we didn't have to worry about that. And I didn't, where it says submit comment applications for connection and all that, I obviously submitted to the city of Naperville, which has its own power company. So that's kind of, it's really pretty straightforward there. And before we did this, I'll be honest with you, I compared like 5 different systems before I made a decision, which I typically do whenever I make a major purchase. And so the first thing the company that I picked said to me is, okay, we want 9 months of your electricity use. So this is an Excel spreadsheet. Sorry, it's tipped, but that basically says from July 6, 2018 to October 4th, 2019, this is how much power I used every month, how much it cost me, 11 cents a kilowatt hour, and then how much the electricity cost for each one of these months. So, it varied $146 a month, sometimes as low as $98 a month over here. So they wanted to know this because they needed to load how I could do with solar power. Okay. Now, this is a picture of my home in Naperville here. On the left, the house is facing east towards Chicago. And so as the sun comes up, it comes up directly at those panels that you see on the front of the house right here. And so my home is powered. These are 2 electric cars at the time. And then as the sun goes up over the peak of the house, the front and the back start sharing power, and the back of the home picks up. And this is the back of the house here, and there are the solar panels. And I mentioned earlier, these skylights had to be replaced, and we had to remove panels to help do that. So this is the kind of the proximity of the way it works for us. It works very well. So this is Sunday. I took a picture of, how are we doing that day? So June 10th was not an unusual day. It was a sunny day. And I want to explain to you what this means. On the right, 209% of the power we used was generated, which means I sold all the rest back. So this is how much energy, 63 kilowatt hours. Kilowatt hours is a measure of how much energy, okay? It's like miles per gallon in a car, and sort of how many gallons you have. So, and then the energy we used in our home was 30 kilowatt hours. So you can see the sun gave us twice as much energy as we needed. So you can see in the morning before the sun came up, the black line, focus on the black line. The black line was how much energy my house was using. And then it suddenly went up. I think I probably plugged one of our electric cars in, because the amount of energy being used is quite a bit. And I think that's about 7,000 watts when that happens. And then as the car got charged after a couple of hours here, the amount of power we used went down, and there it was for the rest of the day. So that's the usage. Now, the next one to look at is this orange. The orange is when the sun came up around 6 a.m. It got stronger and it got stronger and stronger. And then it got weaker as the day went on until when the sun went down. So in the wintertime, you have short days, so you don't get as much power. And in the summertime, you have long days, so you get more power in the course of the day. So as you can see here, when that blue came up, I sold this right here. Now, even though I generated a lot of energy, I sold this right here. So the second bar that you see is what I sold. In other words, it's below the 0 line here. So the amount above, the house used part of that. You can see the black line, and the rest was sold to the city of Naperville. Now, the next hour, this is how much was produced, and I sold this. And then I produced way more, over 4.4 kilowatt hours here, but I didn't sell any. Why? Because it went into my car, because the car was charging, and it went into the battery of my car, so there wasn't much to sell back. But then as the charge came down, I kept getting more power, and I started selling. So I started selling. All of this is taking the sun and selling it to the city of Naperville, and that's the way that worked. So how did I do the next day? Well, this is the next day, which was a cloudy day. And so I don't recall why we were using way more power here in the morning, but we were. And you can see, gee, if it's a cloudy day, how do you get these orange bars? Let's go back a page again to Sunday, the sunny day. We were at the peak here, we were generating almost 8,000, well, about 8,000 kilowatt hours. But if you go over here, it's down less than 2.7 kilowatt hours right here. Well, that's because it's a cloudy day. So you say, well, you mean you actually get power on cloudy days? Absolutely. The sun goes right through many clouds. As long as it's a bright day, you get power. And in this case, 134% of all the power we needed was used. So that meant I sold 34% of my power back to the city of Naperville. I made money. So everything I used basically came, and it washed. When I sold it back, it washed everything I bought over here. So I hope this is clear how this works. Now, on a really dark, cloudy day, or if there's snow on the solar panels, which slides off usually within, a couple of days, maybe a week, worst case, you don't get any power. And so you're just pulling from the grid. So it's like when you can, it's there. So how did I do in 2021, which is the first complete year on solar? Well, 94% of all the energy we use in our home to power 2 electric cars came from the power plant that's on my roof, the solar panels. And you can see month by month how I did. And so you can see in the month of January and February, it was terrible. Short days, lots of clouds, snow. And you can see I did get power these 2 months, but it wasn't great. And I didn't sell any back until looks like March. It got better and got better and got better. And then as we went into December, it was still generating power, but not quite as much. But I was also using a lot of power back then too. So anyway, 2022 was a little not quite as good. 92% of my power came from the roof, and this is the breakdown here. So I hope this is helpful to help you understand, how this was going for me. And essentially, our bill in 2021 and 2022, we saved 2,759 savings for lifetime in terms of our electric bill. So it's now 9 months in 2020, it did not capture because there was a defect in the reporting to the cloud. So clearly I'm pocketing at least, $1,200 a year, and it was over 22 tons of carbon emissions avoided. Now, in our case, if we had not done anything, it would have over 25 years, we would have spent a projected about $58,000 for power. Power from coal, 70% power from coal. Because of the panels, I saved $28,242. And this is how much I spent. This is fixed costs that you can't avoid. So it was about $20,000 here in net solar system costs, which saved us over time about $1,200 to $1,300 or more a month. So the payback is around 6 or 7 years. The projection at the time this was implemented, it was about 8 years, 8 to 9 years. Actually, I think we're doing better than that. And our solar bill for the city of Naperville, you can see here, here's the amount of electricity in the month of May, essentially the month of May here. And so we were charged 477 kilowatts. We generated 840. So the fixed fee, which everybody has to pay, whether you have solar panels or not, was $16.50. I pulled $51.02 from the grid. I sold back negative $89.91. I got back a purchase power adjustment. That's a kind of a fee of $1.19. And to be on the renewable program, I had to pay $5. So for the month of May, I sold $18.58 back to the city of Naperville, didn't pay a dime for electricity. Now, unlike some cities, that $18 goes against my utility bill. So it pays for water and refuge and all of those things. In other places, it would be a credit against the future months, and there would be a sync up at the end of the year. So this is our system. I'll just skip over this for the sake of time. I basically wanted to just make sure you understand. It's a 10.8 kilowatt system, DC, 9.88 AC for people that care about that. And we have warranties of 25 years. So for us, we plugged in the numbers with the EPA, and it's like driving 483,000 fewer miles. It's like 216,000 fewer pounds of coal. It's like 3,357 new trees. It's like charging 25 million fewer smartphones. Sounds good to me. And then I'll wrap up the solar portion, and we'll hand this over to Derek. Do you need a battery? Absolutely not. We don't. The city of Naperville is highly dependable electric grid. So we didn't feel we needed it. We pull from the grid or we sell to the grid. But you can if you want to. Some people do that, and it does help for their power to actually get more. And it also helps during, say, a power outage. But probably not going to remove you from the grid. It's good to be on the grid. And the systems, if the grid were to go down, it would provide the batteries somewhere around 10 to 15 hours of power. So I'll just leave this on the solar part of this, is to say, this we'll send you these. This is contact information about the chapter, the solar website that's very important. My email, Lisa's email, Christina's email for information. And there's a seminar coming up that Lisa pointed out on June 20th. Here's the information and the link to that for ICEA, which is a very important organization about solar. So with that, Derek.
All right, let me share my screen. I think I saw some questions coming in over the chat, but maybe Tom was the idea to.
Yeah, I'll look at them.
Or yeah, answer them in the chat. That'll work too. All right, well, I will share my screen and my slides. Can y'all see that?
Yep.
All right. Yeah. So yeah, thanks, Tom. And yeah, I think I recognize some of the faces here from when I was giving a talk back in January. So this is a follow-up to that talk. I did include some of the content that I talked about in January, just to kind of follow through on it. And help provide some context for what we've done so far. So last time I talked about our process of installing solar panels, and then we had just begun the process of electrifying everything else, specifically the heating in our home. So that's mostly what I'm going to focus on today, but it's really great to hear Tom's experience, because I had, it overlaps quite a bit with ours. So it's really good to hear that. It's validating. So I'll dive right in. So I live in Oak Park. This is going to be a talk about heat pumps. This is just a little bit about me. I do data and tech work here in Chicago. I run a couple of organizations, a nonprofit called Chi-Hacknight, and I have a civic tech consulting company. And then I've, in the last year, joined the Oak Park Climate Action Network, which is how I think I know Pam, who invited me to speak back in January. So I've got to start with disclaimers. I'm not an expert, I'm just a person who's going through this. I've learned some things, but I'm certainly not an expert on all these subjects. Also, another disclaimer, it's worthwhile because everyone's home and living situation is different. It sounds like there may be a decent number of single family home owners on this call, which is great, but most people in Chicago are not single family home owners, right? At least if you live in the city proper. So it's worth noting that, because what I can do and the control I have over my own home and the property itself is just quite different than someone who's renting, for example, right? A lot of these things are not really viable for renters. So it's worth just making a note of that. That's really, my experience is from that. And then the third one is that we have a ducted heating system that was already installed in our home. I know I've heard just from talking to a lot of folks, it's radiator heat is really common in Chicago. And so I don't know much about doing that. But what I do know is we have a ducted system, which from what I've learned is actually, it made the transition for us easier. So just something to keep in mind as I'm going through all this. This is also something worth, I mentioned in the last talk that I gave, but it's also worth repeating again here. This is actually similar to the chart that Tom showed, although this is actually specific to Illinois. I think that the chart you were showing was for the entire US. I've worked on a project at Chi-Hacknight for the last year and a half called Decarb My State, where we actually look at all the emissions for all 50 states plus DC. And actually, it is quite different from different states. Like, there is quite a lot of variety when it comes to where emissions are coming from. We intentionally kind of break it down into 4 broad categories: emissions from buildings, emissions from transportation, power generation, and then like everything else. And the reason we do that is because electrification essentially is the solution to these three big pieces, right? If we electrify every machine, then those things go to zero, essentially, or net zero. Everything else down here, like farming, agriculture, dump sites, industrial processes, we do need to address those, but they're much more challenging to do. And so electrification addresses this. So buildings in Illinois take up 15% of our carbon budget, and transportation is about 26. And then, as Tom mentioned, we still got a decent number of coal plants and quite a few gas and oil plants as well that are generating emissions. So I found this useful to learn about and think about, what do I tackle first? And I actually, it's why in my previous talk, the first thing we actually did tackle was solar. So we've already done solar panels, and I'll talk a little bit more about sort of how to help, but it's worthwhile to note that I think, as Tom also mentioned, having that done first made the incentive for transitioning everything else to electric that much easier of a decision to make, because, as Tom mentioned, you're getting free energy. So why not switch to the appliance that's free to run, essentially? So I've heard from other folks, they recommend doing solar last, but in our case, we did it first, and it seems like it's been a good move on our end. But there's, of course, no one right way to do it. It's also worth noting, it varies region to region. There is actually quite a lot of electric heating happening in the United States, especially in the southern parts of the country, and also actually in the Northwest, which I thought was kind of surprising. This is a recent map created by the Washington Post, and they aggregate how Americans heat their homes. So the yellow is electric. Red is oil, which I didn't even know that, but a lot of people, it's very popular in the New England area to use oil, also in Alaska. And then we're in this big purple area. It's either natural gas or propane for us. And I've learned that there's just, people are really, especially HVAC professionals, they just are, it's tried and true to them. They love it, right? They think it's just the best. Nothing could beat natural gas from reliability and all those kinds of things. So there's like a culture there that is like we're up against. I think, Tom, you mentioned that your HVAC installer talked you out of going with heat pumps. I've experienced that as well. And I think a lot of that is just because look at what's here. I think that the numbers are just, it's not just the majority, it's something like 80 or 90% of at least Oak Park homes are gas heated. So there's a lot of work to do, and you look to your neighbor and they're probably using gas. So you feel like a bit of an outlier if you're trying to switch to electric. But that is one of the challenges of our age, because everyone will have to. If we are actually going to get down to net zero emissions, we will all have to do, what I've done and some of the things that Tom's done. So worth just sort of putting that like national context out there as well. So again, I'm all about clean electrification, and you've probably heard this pitch before, but that is where I'm coming from. And so what brings me here is I wrote several blog posts now, and as I've been doing this work on our home, I've been documenting it. So all the things I'm talking about, I go to in like pretty detailed explanations of on my blog, on my website, it's just derekeder.com. I'll share some links at the end along with these slides. But this talk is based on what I've written about it already. So I'm going to talk about heat pumps. It's first worth noting a little bit about just answering the question, what is a heat pump? A lot of people think, oh, it's just electric heating. And that's kind of right, but it's also not quite right. It's not actually, heat pumps don't generate heat. They move heat. And that's actually a pretty important distinction because it is much more efficient because it's moving heat instead of creating it. Your toaster, for example, creates heat. It's, you see those little coils and they light up. That is electric, but it's actually really inefficient. And that is when you hear people talking about, oh, don't go electric, it'll be too expensive. That's usually what they're thinking of, or they're basing it on that assumption that you'll use what some people call electric resistance heating, which is essentially the same technology that, again, powers your toaster or your hair dryer. Heat pumps are completely different technology. In fact, you probably already have one. You just maybe don't know it. If you have central cooling, an air conditioner, it is essentially using the same technology as a heat pump. It's taking, cool air from the outside and it's pumping it into your home. A heat pump is the same, except it just works both ways. It works in reverse and the normal way. So you can actually pull warm air even out of, and this is the kind of magic of heat pumps, you can pull warm air even out of outside temperatures when they're close to zero or below zero even. And technology has gotten to the point where actually you can pull heat out of sub-zero temperatures, which seems kind of crazy, but you can do it. And that's why heat pumps, especially in cold weather climates, which we live in, are now viable. They really weren't maybe 20 years ago or 10 years ago. And that's where a lot of people sort of get stuck on, oh, they just don't work here. Yeah, that's for Florida or that's for Texas. And I'm here to tell you that that's old information. That's outdated information. It absolutely does work here. And I am living proof that it does. And many other people, I mean, Maine is like really big into heat pumps, and you better believe they get cold winters there. So that is what heat pumps do. And they actually, for our home, they heat up and cool. It's the same device. So we replaced our old furnace, as I'll show you, and our air conditioning unit with just a heat pump unit that does both. And so that's just worth talking a little bit about just what's going on here. So I've learned, and pretty quickly, like this is actually the hardest thing when it comes to electrification. Heat pumps in Chicago are the biggest challenge. And I'll talk a little bit about, at least for us, why it was. So this is our old furnace. It's a gas furnace. It's 125,000 BTUs an hour. I learned very quickly, you can't just get 125,000 BTU heat pump. They don't make them with that many BTUs, at least residentially, available. And they don't make them yet. They keep getting better and bigger, but for now, like that just doesn't exist. And so we talked to some people and realized that the first thing we had to do, and again, I talked about this last time, is put our home on an energy diet. We have to figure out how to reduce that number from 125,000 to something more manageable. Because heat pumps, as I'll show you, you can get a heat pump that's like 40,000 BTUs or 20,000 BTUs. And yes, I could have just installed 4 heat pumps right off the get-go, but that's kind of an expensive proposition. And there was actually, as I'll show, some low-hanging fruit as it comes to efficiency that we were able to do to make it so we just didn't need that. It's also worth noting that our gas furnace is 80% efficient. So right off the bat, 25,000 of those BTUs are just wasted because it's an 80% efficient system. So our home actually only needed 100,000 BTUs. So, and heat pumps are very efficient. So you can essentially just take their sticker value as what their actual heating is going to be, as opposed to a gas furnace like this. So the first thing we did to figure out how drafty our home was we did a blower door test. This is a contraption that they put up usually on your front door. They blow air and they make sort of a negative pressurized space in your home, and that draws in the outside air, and it sort of makes all the leaks in your home very observable. It really heightens that, it exaggerates the leaks that are already there. And then they go around with like a heat gun and an infrared gun, and they identify spaces that have leaks. So this is from the report we got, and we can see, the middle picture is our kitchen, the sort of walls above it. This is like my daughter's closet. You can see the walls here. And so this is where it gets to, you start to really see it's not just one thing, it's a lot of little things that, as far as like where you're, it's not just like getting a new roof, as I've found. It's little places that have missing pieces of insulation. This is the report we got. It is one of the more confusing things I've ever read. As far as a report, a bunch of numbers and acronyms I've never heard of before. The thing that really mattered was this number here, this 32,000, and also this one I've learned is one that like is an industry standard 8. This is the number of air changes per hour for your home. So the way to think about this number is we completely replace the air in our home 8 times an hour. which is a lot. So think about like, if I have to get our home heated up to a livable temperature, think about the coldest months of the year, 8 times an hour, which is very inefficient. And so these numbers were very high. We have what is called a leaky home. And by comparison, tight homes are something, more like, a third of that. So we had a long ways to go. And so what we did was we found an insulator. We used a group called Intelligent Energy Services. And all these links I'll have in my blog, but they actually went around and found there were just some places that were missing insulation. They found that just an entire panel sort of in our kitchen, they just, like, whoever was doing the work, our home's 100 years old, whenever in that 100 years, they just missed it. There's just nothing there. So they cut a big hole. And this is one of the painful things about insulating is almost always they got to cut into drywall, which is kind of annoying. But they went in, they sealed that all up. They went and they air sealed our attic. And then they also found just a few random places on our second floor that were just missing insulation. And so that whole process, I'll show you all the numbers and how much this cost in the end. But the process of completely, doing all that insulating cost around like $2,300, which, as you'll see from the other expenses, that is a very small percentage of like the costs for things. Like a small heat pump is like $7,000. So like just doing insulation really does make a huge difference. And for us, it was noticeable. It was actually a 20% improvement in that score. That 3,000 number went down to more like 2,600. So that was actually a huge improvement. It meant that, okay, 20% improvement over the 100,000 BTUs of heat. Now we only need 80,000 BTUs. And that's just, even if we didn't switch to a heat pump or any other system, we're gonna be using less energy anyway. So it's just a good, like, on its own, like, thing to do is insulate. So we did that, was really excited about that. And then we hired someone to do drywalling afterward, which is, people do that. It's pretty common. The second thing we did, and I think I did talk about this last time as well, is we did a process called AeroSeal. And this is a picture of someone doing an AeroSeal process at not our home, a different home. Ducts are slotted metal, and oftentimes there's little tiny gaps where the air can leak out. In some cases, you can lose, a third of the actual air. It just goes into your walls. It goes into places that are not useful. So the AeroSeal process, they send this mist into and it's non-toxic, into your ducts, and it sort of naturally finds the holes and it congeals and it fills them up. And so this is the result of our AeroSeal process. And it's one of those processes, just like the insulating, where you can actually measure before and after and see its effectiveness. This is the live, like the real time chart of them closing. You can see the holes in our ducts being closed here. And so we had equivalent of a 98 square inch hole in our ducts through the whole system, and that was reduced to an 8-inch hole. So it was a huge reduction in the wasted air, and it meant that our ducted system was going to be more efficient. It was going to be better at moving air around. And we did feel that even before we switched to the heat pumps. We felt the difference, especially on our second floor, where it's the furthest from the actual heating system. And so we saw an improvement from there. So again, it's just worth it to do it on its own. And this process cost around $3,000, I want to say, and it took about 8 hours for them to do it. I'll show the pricing at the end. Okay, so we did those things, and it was actually finally time after doing that to do heat pumps. And one of the things that really resonated with me that you'd mentioned, Tom, was that the HVAC installers sort of not wanting to do this and telling you, and in fact, several professionals, people who are, that's their job, told me it wasn't possible, told me it was going to be too expensive to run it, or it wasn't going to be warm enough. And I've learned that a lot of that is that they are just, they want to satisfy their customers, and they don't want to do anything. They're sort of naturally kind of conservative when it comes to choosing what they're going to do. They don't want to have people calling them in the middle of winter and being like, hey, that system you installed isn't doing well enough. So they're going to stick with what they know, and what most HVAC installers know is gas, especially in this region. And so a lot of them really just did not did not give me any confidence. And actually that was what I was in the middle of when I gave my talk in January. I was feeling pretty like dejected about it. It was very, it was discouraging, because here are people telling you the thing you want to do, the thing you're sort of told is the right thing to do, is not possible. And it turns out that professionals can be wrong. And there are ways to actually measure and come up with a way to actually come up with the system that will work. And there's a process, and this is a lesson that I would definitely hope everyone takes, and I'll show this at the end as well. There's a process to measure what your heating system actually needs to be. It's called a manual J calculation. And it's something that if an HVAC installer doesn't know how to do it, just pick another one, because this is a pretty important essential tool, and it will actually scientifically figure out what is that right profile, what is the right energy needs for your home. That needs to be done. That calculation needs to be done, so you can figure out what you actually need. And then when you have that information, okay, let's look at what the options are. So it took us a while to find a contractor, an HVAC installer that actually did that and actually was supportive of heat pumps. And so we found two actually. And the one we ended up going with is an Oak Park based company called Energy Matters. And they do all systems, but they use this manual J calculation, and they have confidence in installing heat pump systems as well. So we worked with them, and they came up with a plan. And our plan, this is a way to sort of represent it. The chart on our left is the old system. So this is the gas system. Again, it was 125,000 BTUs. A full 25,000 of those BTUs was just going out the window. And so this is what we had before in terms of heating, 100,000 BTUs. What we decided to come up with was a 2 heat pump system backed up with electric resistive coils. So the 2 heat pumps are these 2 green bars here. The electric resistance coils are this yellow area. And then the blue was the efficiency we gained from insulating and from the AeroSeal process. So we're using less, and we add these 3 things together to actually more than meet what we needed. In fact, we only really needed about 80,000 BTUs, and we got a bit of an insurance buffer there just in case to meet all those needs. By the way, like, you have to do this. You have to show, especially in Oak Park, I'm sure it's true in other municipalities, to get the permits to do the work, you have to show that the systems you're going to install will be able to meet your heating needs at, I believe they make them calculated at a -13 degrees Fahrenheit benchmark. So it's like you need to be able to keep your home heated sufficiently at that low temperature for them to even give you the permits. So like this has to work. The math has to work. Again, if your installer doesn't know that or doesn't like think about, because there are some, I assume, walk away, find a different one, but it needs to sort of meet those regulations. So this is the system that we came up with. I want to talk a little bit also about those electric or resistive coils, because again, those are inefficient. The heat pumps are where all of our efficiency is coming from. This is inefficient, and you really don't want to run this all the time. If we were running this every day, our energy bills would be higher than what we were paying before, maybe even with solar panels. So it was actually really imperative that we got our system to the point where these only kicked on below a certain temperature. And we actually figured out a way to make it designed so that they only kick on, and actually there's a system installed to ensure that this is true. They only kick on when it gets below 20 degrees, or rather, it only allows them to be kicked on when it's below 20 degrees. You really the system is smart enough to always be relying on this most of the time. And then only when it really needs it in those colder months does it actually kick those on. And that's, again, that's how we save that money. That's how we make sure that we're always using the most efficient stuff and only really using the inefficient parts when we need it. This is a chart that our HVAC installer actually did and provided for us. It's a little confusing to read, but this is the performance of the heat pump over as compared to temperature. So over here it's 70 degrees, over here it's negative 17 degrees. Heat pumps, this is a 40,000 BTU heat pump. Heat pumps do lose efficiency as it gets colder. So as you can see, when it's, close to negative, 15, we're getting about, 29,000 instead of the 4. So we're losing about 10,000 BTUs. Still works. Again, it's magic that it still works, but it doesn't get as much heat as it would if it was operating at a normal temperature. This green line is when the electric resistance heaters kick on. They're triggered to turn on at around 20 degrees. We have one coil, and then we actually have another one that's triggered to kick on, a second coil that's triggered to kick on at 0. And so these add that extra heat in those sort of scenarios where it gets very cold. Most of the year, like 70% of the year, we're in this region, but it's really in those coldest months in December and January, February, that this scenario is happening. So that's how they decided to set it up for us, which is it's working great. They have kicked on, back when we installed it earlier in the year. We haven't done a full year. I guess that's the fourth disclaimer. We haven't made it all the way through a year yet. So I will certainly be writing about this and reporting back on how it's working, but it's working great so far. This is the heat pump, the main heat pump we installed. It's a 40,000 BTU an hour system. It's 3 ton, it's Mitsubishi. And then those electric resistance coils are actually here, this piece here, and it's just sort of added in, and they kind of work as one cohesive unit. We also ended up getting a second heat pump because we found that it was, we wanted a little bit more heat pump energy. And we also have a basement space that's not used a lot. It's finished, but it's mostly just like the kids play down there. And so we decided to use this opportunity to create a 2-zone system. So this system is for our living space, kitchen, like bedrooms on the second floor. And this is really just for the basement when we're down there, which is not often. So it was another way to save money because most of the time this thing is off. But it can turn on whenever we're down there, or if it's cold, we'll probably have it running, in the coldest months just to keep things warm enough down there. And then each come with a condenser. So this is, going back to why I was saying this is very similar to an air conditioner. This is actually the other piece to a heat pump. Each one has a condenser that lives outside and pulls in that air from the outside and pipes in the heat from that into the interior. So that is something worth noting, is that if you do install a heat pump, each one will have its own condenser. And that's something that you just have to calculate space for. We happen to have space for it. These things are actually really quiet. Both of them together are much quieter than the air conditioner condenser that we had before. So they're very quiet. But if we did, going back to the scenario where we install like 4 heat pumps, this is where it gets ridiculous. Like, I don't know where 4 condensers would fit in our backyard. That's why it kind of gets to be not a viable path to go down. Sure, we could have had them, but we'd have condensers like, all over our backyard. And, they're not the nicest things to look at. So these happen to be tucked away on the side of our yard, as most are. But, we really wouldn't have had much room to keep it hidden if it was a third or a fourth. This is the cost of everything. Again, this is in my blog, but, we did, it was about, $400 for the blower door. We did the air seal process. It was about $3,000. The attic insulation was $2,500. We actually got some rebates. So a lot of the contractors have to do rebates up front. And so Nicor Gas just had a rebate that we were able to get. And then we also got these are the 2 heat pumps. Each one got their own discounts from ComEd. There are other heat pumps that can get discounts from upfront discounts, but depending on your income from the federal government. We're going to get a tax break later, which of $2,000. But if you make below a certain amount, then you actually get that up front as opposed to getting it as a tax break. And then also, just because we had to do it, we had to do some drywall repair. So the total cost for this whole system was about $26,000. And a way to think about this is our furnace was at the end of its life, and we were going to have to replace it in the next year or so anyways. A new gas furnace equivalent to the one we had would have been between $10,000 to $12,000. So that's a cost that we would have had to pay anyways. So another way to think about it is, okay, it's 26,000, less the 12K we would have paid otherwise. So we're still paying, but we're completely off of natural gas, methane gas for our heating, and we're saving money, especially because, again, we get to utilize those solar panels. We don't pay a gas bill for our heating, which would be our largest gas heating expense. And it's just drawing the energy straight from our solar panels. So I haven't done the calculation about what the buyback or the payback period for this would be. It's probably going to be less, honestly, than a solar panel system. The solar panel system is just the math just works out really well. Plus, with all the incentives that Tom mentioned, the incentives are less for heat pumps. I'm not going to lie about that. You're not getting as sweet of a deal for heat pumps as you are with solar panels. It's still really good to do because it is efficient. And also it happened to improve the quality, the comfort of our home. Our old system was a single stage. So it was, and if you have a central, if you have a furnace, you maybe know what I'm talking about, when it's on and then it's off and then it's on and then it's off. And it's sort of like 100% zero. And that leads to pretty unequal distribution of temperature. The heat pump system is a variable speed. So it's actually on constantly at a low level. And so ever since we installed it, it actually has been very evenly distributed temperature in our home. It's been very comfortable, even in the spring months as it's been fluctuating a lot. So that was an improvement that was really, you could put a price on that. I'm not sure you would, how much it would be, but it's certainly an improvement to our lives. And also it just so happens that the filters on these things, because it's cycling so much air, are much better than our old system. So the air quality in our home is noticeably better as well. So those are some other advantages to it. These are the general lessons learned, just to sum them up. HVAC installers have a wide range of conflicting opinions. You should really just keep talking to them. And I have a few that I liked that get it, that do heat pumps. You should find them out, but you will find people that tell you that this is not possible. I really wouldn't trust any HVAC installer that does not do a manual J calculation. Some will just eyeball it and be like, "Nah, you need this," and they're guessing. I guess they're professionals, but they're guessing. So you should really insist on the manual J. If they don't want to or don't know what that is, move on. Insulation really does matter. Again, the cost of this was it's just so much less energy we're using, and we only paid a little bit of money in comparison to everything else. Again, going solar really helped incentivize us to electrify. And then one thing we did is, this is a technical detail, but if you only get this 30% credit up to $2,000 for us in a given year. We could have spaced these things out over several years and gotten that $2,000 each year, but we just decided to do everything all at once. We did the hot water heater all at the same time. We did other things at the same time, so we could have spread it out. And so that's just something to know that's available. So this is the list, and I'm actually, I am going to be writing a third blog post soon, because now that the heat pumps are done, we've actually been able to do everything else. So our home is actually fully electric now. We ended up, after getting the heat pumps installed, we recently bought an electric vehicle. We replaced our gas dryer. We got a induction stove. This is a heat pump hot water heater that replaced our other hot water heater. And so as of literally 2 days ago, this is the email that I got when I canceled my gas account. And so it is officially done, and it is possible here in Chicago. So that's my talk. Happy, and then here's some resources. I'll share these slides in the chat so you can take a look through. But that's my talk. Thanks.
Nice job, Derek. Excellent work.
Thank you.
So we're close to out of time. Do we have any questions? We've been trying to keep up in the chat, and we'll make sure to get the chat to Derek in case he wants to comment on some of the things in there. But we'll get the slides out to everybody. We'll get the chat out to everybody. We'll get the video for those who couldn't make it, or for those who want to see it again, onto YouTube, and we'll send you those links. But any raised hands? I guess, John, you have one? Go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick. I had a question on the home audit person, and Pam put Insight Services. Is that what were you answering me, Pam, that was an audit person?
Yeah, I followed Derek's recommendations and used the same contractors that he did.
And that was to audit the home? Okay, good, thanks.
Lisa?
I just want to make sure that PJ sees the chat message because I did some research on Ohio contractors. And I private messaged you in the chat. So hopefully you saw that.
Okay. Anybody else?
Um,
Well, I hope this was informative.
oh, sorry, real quick, one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
Does the heat pump produce water? Do you have to drain it?
Oh yeah, really good question. Yes, so that was part of the installation consideration. The drainage for the main heat pump was already sort of set up because it's in the utility room and there's already drainage sort of set up there. So that was part of the installation process, is they had that. The heat pump that the mini split that I showed, the smaller heat pump, they had to figure out where that was going to drain to. And so that actually, there's a little pipe that leads out to an outside drain, and that drains water into there. So yeah, it does. And apparently we haven't seen it in the hottest months yet, but when it's in air conditioning mode, it can produce quite a lot of water. I think they mentioned something like 3 gallons a day or something. Seems like kind of a lot. So making sure that you have that thought through as far as where that water goes is a definitely important consideration.
Lisa, did you have a further comment? I guess not. Any last comments?
No, I've really appreciated both Tom and Derek, because I'm starting down this path myself and I'm trying to take all your recommendations, and it's really helpful.
Yeah, and we didn't have time, which, that's fine, for overview on some electric vehicle issues. We'll do this another time, and we'll bring you up to date on that. But clearly, the solar, the heat pumps, you can see where that breakdown is. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming. I appreciate it very much, and have a good night.